The first time Kessa sensed something was odd about Pellinor was the evening the western pavements tilted and sent a brass age fountain rolling through the court of lanterns. The citizens blamed a distant earthquake, grumbled about ill-sited masonry, and hired masons to recenter the slabs. Kessa, junior archivist in the Observatory of Motions, stayed late, poring over a set of navigational ledgers that no one had touched for 400 years. The numbers told her what the city fathers had forgotten. The longitude of Pellinor shifted nightly, drifting by fractions of a degree no earthquake could explain. Pellinor was famous for never quite fitting anyone's maps. Merchants said sailors drew its outline where wind and whimsy placed it, that its keys might float on fog itself. Kessa had always dismissed the legends, but after the fountain incident, she cross-referenced star charts with ancient trade logs and realized Pellinor had been creeping westward, or, more precisely, the ground beneath the city was striding. That ground was smooth basalt, hard as iron, yet it curved subtly, forming vast plates that met at faultless seams. She had walked them all her life and never asked why the city's understreets echoed like drumskins. The next tilt came 2 weeks later. The east districts lifted half a span, spilling canal water across pleasure gardens. Again, carpenters hammered, priests droned, and citizens returned to their lunches. But Kessa descended through an unused sewer outflow she had discovered on a faded engineering plan. A stiff door opened to a stair of black glass. The stair spiraled down, not into dirt, but into a hollow where warm air breathed upward. At the bottom, she found herself in a cathedral-sized cavern, whose walls shimmered pearl gray, as though made of bone, smoothed by tide. She heard a pulse. Not an echo of her heart, something deeper, grander, a slow organ note every 10 seconds. She touched the wall, felt it throb, like cartilage, like flesh. Kessa fled. That night she wrote a report for the governor of Datum, but senior clerks intercepted it. The official answer returned, stamped, natural vapor chambers, concern unwarranted. Her colleagues teased her. She decided to bring evidence no bureaucrat could ignore. She convinced 2 friends, Ilian, a lensmaker, and Mara, a canal barge pilot, to join an illicit descent. Ilian brought phosphorus lamps. Mara provided rope and a rebel cheer. They entered by another forgotten hatch near the arena. The stair ended in a tunnel sloping toward the city's center. They walked for hours while the ceiling rose until it became skyless night. Lamps revealed a substrate that looked unnervingly like ribbed muscle. The ground vibrated in a cadence none of them could place, though it reminded Mara of the way her father's draft horses heaved after sprinting. They reached an abyss where the tunnel ceiling opened to a black gulf. On the opposite side, pillars curved upward like titanic vertebrae. Wind issued from below, warm and scented faintly of brine. Ilian, normally steady, sat down, shaking. "We are inside something," he whispered. Kessa unrolled a chart she had copied from the archives. The oldest extant plan of Pellinor, drawn by a monk who claimed to have looked upon the maker of the city. The monk had sketched an oval beneath the city's footprint, labeling it simply, "the back." She had thought it allegory. Now she understood. Mara, more practical, tossed a pebble over the edge. It fell for a long time before a wet splash echoed. The sound drifted up, muted, like water inside a living cavity. When they returned to the surface, dawn painted the roofs gold, markets bustled, and bells called the faithful to mid-spring services. The city felt oblivious. Kessa's mind raced. If Pellinor rested upon an organism, why had no previous generation noticed? Perhaps the answer hid inside the liturgies she had always ignored. She visited the Temple of Foundations. Priests recited hymns about the Beneath Bearer, mythical titan who wandered until the faithless disbelieved its steps. The verses read as children's tales, but they matched her measurements. The Titan's stride described the same arc as the city's migration. That very afternoon, Pelennor lurched. Streets canted so sharply that the statue of Prophet Sim fissioned along old cracks. People screamed, but within hours repair crews braced walls and normality resumed, brittle but intact. Nobody died. Therefore, nobody wanted to think harder. But Kessa noticed birds launching from rooftops, as if startled by something nobody heard, and a sulfur odor riding the breeze. She returned to her archive. The oldest scrolls were brittle lace, yet one charred fragment chronicled a civic council from 12 centuries prior. It told of the Great Molt, when the earth beneath shed its outer face and citizens replaced it with quarried stone. They had paved over something unspeakable and sworn collective amnesia. Kessa's stomach tightened. A molt implied biology. Biology implied limits. What happened when the shell they lived upon weakened beyond masonry's help? Ilian calculated. Based on star drift, the creature, he began calling it the carrier, circled the globe every 40 years. Pelennor celebrated a holiday called the Long Return, roughly that often, venerating the day the city's founders, fleeing persecution, arrived upon already laid streets. The myth said the land welcomed them. What if the land had literally arrived under them? Their discoveries might have remained coffeehouse speculation, but the carrier got sick. Summer brought heat from below. Cellars steamed, wells frothed. Fish in the canals floated belly up, eyes boiled white. The sage of the bathhouse measured water temperature rising a degree each day. Smiths complained their forges needed less coal. Gamblers set odds on whether the city would cook or burn first. The governor launched commissions, plumbers to unplug sewers, magistrates to punish rumored saboteurs. Each commission ignored the underside. Kessa tried again, bringing Ilian's sketches of vertebrae. The Chamberlain of Works laughed. "Your bones are stalactites distorted by fear." He escorted her out politely. Days later, ground tremors deepened. Buildings swayed in a rhythm like an arrhythmic heart. Pigeons fled entirely. Night air tasted metallic. Then, without warning, half the lamps across the western district extinguished simultaneously. Nothing was wrong with the oil. The wicks had simply vanished, dissolved into white dust. Fright overcame complacency. Citizens filled temples, begging explanations. The priests offered processions. Engineers tested gas lines that never existed. None of it mattered. Every 20 hours the shuddering worsened. Cracks snaked through the forum. Marble steps sagged. The carrier was failing. Kessa, Mara, and Ilian decided ignorance would kill everyone. They needed proof even the most skeptic eye could not refute. They would descend again, this time to reach the beating core. The only known way deeper than the rib tunnel was via a chasm beneath the old glassworks. Mara bribed a night guard. They entered with a team of volunteers who had overheard rumors. Dock hands, star students, a steel harp musician. 20 in all, carrying tools, rope, and daring. The descent lasted an entire night. They passed striated walls that pulsed like gills. Blood-warm mist coated their clothing. The heartbeat grew thunderous. At times, they had to crawl while their eardrums fluttered. Several volunteers turned back, overwhelmed by claustrophobic awe. At last, they entered a chamber the size of Pellennor's arena. Its walls were translucent, glowing with internal luminescence that traveled in waves. In the center hung an organ, a colossal heart, suspended by ligaments thicker than ship's masts. Dark fluid pumped through each contraction, but sections of the membrane were pale, sallow, puckered like fruit, left too long in sun. Ilian wielded a tool he'd devised, a telescoping rod ending in a mirror cluster. He angled the mirrors, catching light that showed veins shriveling, clots forming, tissue lesioning. The carrier was dying of a disease no physician understood. Mara touched a ligament. It quivered weakly. "It's running out," she whispered. "Whatever engine drives it." Kessa noticed something else. Etched upon the cavern floor were sigils, spirals, feathers, circles within squares, scored by intelligent hand. She recognized early Pelinoran script. Call upon the herders. Beneath, Lay's path. She remembered a myth about sky shepherds, who guided first men across oceans on living islands. Perhaps the founders had once known how to aid the carrier, then forgot. Returning was harder. Tremors jolted them sideways. Twice they dropped tools into fissures that closed behind with a fleshy hiss. When they emerged topside, dawn found the city blanketed by terrified crowds, watching smoke vent from storm drains. The air reeked. Somewhere a bell tolled continuously, though no one pulled its rope. Kessa marched straight to the Grand Council. Ilian carried sketches. Mara lugged a jug of black ichor, collected from the carrier's wound. Guards tried to bar them, but citizens, now frantic, clamored for answers. The archivist's party surged inside. The counselors, pale from sleepless nights, stared as Ilian projected the heart's image through a lantern device against the chamber's ceiling. Gasps. One baron vomited. The Chamberlain of Works fainted. No one now doubted the truth. Pellinor was the shell of a titan, and the titan was dying fast. Panic threatened to burst into riot. Kessa spoke above the uproar. "We can flee," she said, "or we can remember why our ancestors were carried." She told the assembly of the sigils, "Call upon the herders." There were once caretakers. Something guided the carrier. Perhaps they still exist. The council split. Some urged immediate evacuation. But where? Pellinor stood in the middle of an uncharted ocean. The carrier's stride was the city's only bridge to other lands, and it was slowing. Others argued for trying to heal the Titan, like physicians bleeding a patient. Kessa, though compelled by hope, recognized their ignorance. "We must find knowledge beyond our walls," she insisted, "or none survive." That evening, while the council debated themselves hoarse, the carrier faltered. For the first time in recorded memory, it ceased stepping. The city jerked, pitched, and dropped half a meter. Warehouses toppled into the harbor. Waves washed over lower quays. Citizens screamed prayers that turned to coughing from sulfur fumes. The stoppage convinced even the most stubborn. The council appointed Kessa, cartographer of the living depths, granting her command of resources. She formed 3 teams. One to gather every scrap of ancient lore, another to engineer escape craft, and a third, her own expedition, to seek the herding ones. The lore team discovered a treatise hidden in a monastery well outside city walls, in effect, the carrier's scalp, that described stellar beacons anchored upon the creature's dorsal ridges. The beacons, long since stripped for copper, once emitted patterns that drew the shepherds at first waning of vigor. Evidently, the herders responded to a cry for help. Ilian put his lenscraft to work building replicas. They mounted mirrored towers where the ancient pylons had stood, calibrating them using notches cut into foundation stones centuries earlier. Mara organized crews to polish mirrors until they mocked sunlight. When the array fired at dusk, beams of intensified light stabbed skyward, pulsing in geometric cadence. Citizens gathered, eyes luminous with desperate wonder. For 2 nights, nothing answered. Meanwhile, the ground vented steam containing crystals that burned skin. An exodus began, rafts bound with desperation, gliders leaping from high roofs, Most failed. Kessa watched agony unfold and feared she had led them into false hope. On the third night, a storm brewed though the air was calm. High clouds parted, revealing luminous shapes descending. Ovals of amber light, 30 in number, trailing filaments like jellyfish tentacles. The herders had come. They were not creatures so much as vessels, transparent yet glowing with inner dawn. When they approached the beacon towers, their filaments traced the same sigils Kessa had found underground. Where filament met mirror, sparks danced, but no glass shattered. Instead, melodies rang, notes deep as whale song and high as crystal. The carrier stirred. A giant groan rumbled through Pelennor, as if lungs inhaled for the first time in weeks. One herder ship, if ship it was, hovered above the council dome. A filament extended, unfurled, and became a ramp, shaped from living light. Kessa stepped onto it, joined by Mara, Ilian, and a delegation of priests. As they ascended, gravity softened. Bones felt whisper strong. They entered a chamber where translucent forms awaited. Silhouettes with multiple arms, eyes like liquid moons, tall yet delicate. The beings conjured images rather than speech, directly into the visitors' minds. Starfields, migrating leviathans, symbiotic cities, histories of cooperation spanning eras. The message coalesced. The carrier needed energy and guidance. Its inner furnace had cooled. Its navigational senses were lost without the herder's resonance. The pilgrims asked a single question. Can it be saved? Answer. Yes, but soon. The herders required conduits to channel stellar energy into the carrier's nervous lattice. Conduits could be grown rapidly, if seeded with crystals shaped by those who lived upon the Titan's back, crystals attuned to human intention. Pelennor itself must participate in healing. Below, the city counted hours in collapsing arches. Kessa instructed every glassblower, gem cutter, and smith to craft prisms according to patterns the herders beamed into their thoughts. Pearlescent shards flooded plazas. Children carried them, humming melodies picked from the visiting songs. At sunset, the herders positioned themselves in a circle, filaments touching the street stones at 10 equidistant hubs. People placed their crystals where light met ground. The ceremony, if ceremony it was, defied language. Starlight cascaded through the filaments, refracted by the citizen-wrought prisms, then sank into the carrier. Colors no eye had names for rippled across every surface. The ground beneath Pelennor flexed, rose, and began to stride again. Slow, but each step grew surer. Yet healing had a price. The herders showed Kessa a vision. The carrier must dive deep into oceanic thermal vents to fully recharge, submerging the city for 6 days. Structures unsealed for centuries would drown. Citizens must shelter within reinforced districts or evacuate onto herder craft, but either choice meant hardships and loss. Kessa gathered the council and the populace in the great stadium. She explained the Titan's need. Panic threatened, but exhaustion tamed hysteria. People chose. Many boarded the glowing vessels, trusting alien compassion. Others stayed, lashing homes, sealing windows with resin, stockpiling dried fruits. Kessa remained with them. Pelennor was her life's work. The dive began with dawn. The carrier's outer plates, those basalt slats once misnamed bedrock, folded upward to form protective ridges. Water crashed over wharves, submerging markets, temples, gardens. The roar was far worse than any storm. Still, the Titan's own anatomy formed channels that spared key quarters. From within the observatory tower, Kessa watched fish swirl through the forum's colonnade, lanternfish flickering against a statuary. For 6 eternal days, the city existed as an underwater myth. The herders hovered above, their light cutting murk. Deep below, thermal plumes fed the carrier's organs. Tremors lessened, heartbeat steadied. Inside, citizens told stories by lamplight, rediscovering neighbors, singing ballads older than recorded sheet music. On the seventh dawn, the carrier rose. Water sluiced off, carrying debris, but leaving living people clinging to soaked rafters, laughing or weeping. Sunlight struck the refreshed plates. Steam shimmered skyward like incense. The herders did not depart immediately. They hovered, communing both with the Titan and the humans. Images filled minds, vistas of other walking leviathans, each bearing forests, towns, even mountains. A web of life spanning the planet, moving in rhythms unknown to stationary civilizations. The herders invited Pellinor to join consciously, maintain beacons, steward the carrier, pass memory forward. The council ratified a new charter, Guardian City of the Beneath Bearer. Archivists like Kessa became revered. Their duty was to remember, to warn future generations before forgetfulness bred near catastrophe again. Months later, with infrastructure rebuilt on principles learned from the herders, flexible causeways, breathing wells, symbiotic gardens, Pellinor felt lighter, as though the city finally matched the living thing it rode. Children carved toys shaped like the carrier instead of horses. Festivals honored the dive rather than ignoring the ground. And each night, mirror towers pulsed gentle signals to the sky, reminders and invitations. Kessa often visited the rib tunnel, now fitted with safe elevators, where citizens left offerings. Poems, mechanical contraptions, small crystals that absorbed the Titan's faint glow. She would sit, feeling the heartbeat steady and strong. Sometimes Mara joined her, recounting canal races through rebuilt waterways. Ilian lectured apprentices on how to temper glass with resonance. One evening, the herders returned briefly, dropping low above the beacon circle. They projected an image of distant shores, where other cities perched unknowing upon elder beasts, where other crises brewed. Kessa understood. Pellinor was no longer merely passenger. It was emissary. Soon, teams would embark aboard herder vessels to share knowledge, to wake the sleepers before they repeated forgotten folly. She watched the lights depart, carving velvet paths through stars. Below, the carrier took a step, confident, deliberate, rocking Pellinor with familiar, welcome motion. The city glided atop its colossal companion, no longer ignorant, no longer afraid, but alert to the symphony of stride and heartbeat, guiding them around the world in perpetual, living voyage.